Good evening and good evening to everybody, wherever you may be on this lovely earth, well trapped and suffering the crazy world. How do. Oh, we got CPU having a fit again, never mind. So how's your week been? When we had a bit of sun, a bit of heat, things getting a little bit nicer. Hello cause, Slipknot. I'm actually this week, I'm on time. Oh! Well, the lines and the detention are rescinded as of this day. Well done, you. Hello, Debbie. How are you? So just let me just get this up because I need to see what my CPU is doing. It's making a racket. Oh, we're right up at the top. Quick. So if it blanks out, it's probably the CPU. So my apologies before it takes place. I'm very quiet. Okay, let's have a look. How is that? Is that any better? Let's talk about the person. Well, let's talk about the person, she says. I hadn't set off to do that. We may just be able to venture into it slightly as we go. But I think what I want to talk about is something that's a little bit worrying for me, because this comes on the back of murmurs within upon high that there's no need for the parachute regime anymore. What? That's what they say. So you're struggling to hear me? Well, I don't know why. We're on full the blast. How's that? Is that any better? We're on full blast. Maybe you need to turn yours up slightly at your end. I've never been full blast before. So if that's annoying, let me know, somebody. Will you please? So there's murmurs that of talk of disbanding the parachute regiment, which is just absolutely absurd. If there's one bunch of girls you want to remain on the land here, on England, it's that bunch of girls. Yeah, the Red Machine, regardless of what anybody might say. So I don't like that talk, for a start. So now we've got a new Commander-in-Chief Rooney of the army. They're on full already. Well, nobody else seems to be complaining there, Debs. So I don't know what to make of that, but we don't usually have a problem with anybody listening to my gob. Usually, anyway. So here we go. We've got the new army chief. Boom, boom. And what's he saying? Well, he's saying UK's new army chief asks soldiers to prepare for potential World War III. Well, it's not called the UK Army, is it? It's never been called the UK Army. So what's he talking about? This guy's looking like he might be a bit of a fruit bat already, and we don't even know him. And he's called General Sir Patrick Saunders. Well, I mean, you couldn't get more chosen Irish English names than that, could you? And the Sir slapped on the front of it. So I'm looking at him and I think, well, who are you actually? You know what I mean? What kind of a freak are you that's happy to forgo the protection of this nation and realm and off to go to fight the old Russians, which is controlled by the same people that are controlling you. The Russians. The Prussians. So where the planet are you on, sunshine? Because, as I've said before on previous things, I'm now witnessing character traits in some of our guests that I'm not happy with, because of course they're now massaged to actually express the real characters. And in my opinion, where the British Army and all its men required is here on England, without a doubt. Especially given it's been announced that the most vulnerable, so that means the retards, are going to be offered yet more of that juice. So who's going to enforce that? I wonder. Well, if our boys are off hoity-toiting all over Europe, why, I don't know, when Europe clearly doesn't like one part of this fine nation. Why are we going over there to protect the Europeans from their own behaviour in relation to pissing off Vlad the Impaler? So he's now switching off the gas and moving more and more of it over to the east. It doesn't matter to us, we only use 4% of Russian gas. So why is our army being made ready for World War III? It says UK's top army General Sir Patrick Saunders has asked every soldier to prepare to fight against the Russian army in a potential World War III. Hey boys, I hope you're wising up. I really hope you're wising up here. They want you out of here because they're going to plan on doing something while you're away. General Saunders, who took over from General Sir Mark Carlton Smith on Monday, so that's another numpty that doesn't know now. Look, they're probably all crap outs anyway. Told the British soldiers that they must prepare to fight in Europe once again as the conflict in Ukraine continues. Well, Kissinger has spoken. Right? When Kissinger speaks, all the numpties do exactly what they're told because they all know who Kissinger is, and we've briefly touched upon that, but we're going to expand that somewhat after we've looked into this shenanigans. There is now a burning imperative to forge an army capable of fighting alongside our allies and defeating Russia in battle, Sir Patrick said. Why do we need to beat Russia? Another white race. You know, why is... We're so stupid. We're so happy to go and kick the shit out of our own race. Can you not see the bigger picture here? Because this is a race war, yeah, that's going on. And we're not doing very well. We are a generation that must prepare an army to fight in Europe once again. I am the first Chief of the General Staff since 1941 to take command of the army in the shadow of a land war in Europe involving a continental power, General Saunders added. What an absolute knob. Okay. Russia's invasion of Ukraine underlies our core purpose to protect the UK, being ready to fight and win wars on land. Well, what interest has he got in UK apart from the fact that Chalker Westminster is running around calling him names, throwing sanctions all over the shop, forcing him at every move to get closer with China. Now you've got a lot of African countries, India, etc., all saying nah to Biden's proposed changes to the global health rules. You know, come on, see what the hell's going on here. This is all about destroying the West. These moves, all these moves that have been made, that's the Ukraine war itself, on the back of which they're wrecking the food, the supply chain in general. They've hiked the prices to insidious, ridiculous amounts. You know, your house prices are just way beyond people's reach. You're not going to get any joy from the banks because they're busy trying to capture real assets under Basel III, which came into force last year, where they're no longer encouraged to use paper gold. It has to be real gold. So they're being encouraged to pull in real tangible assets to give them some kind of credibility. So that's Basel III acting on. Yet you've got this big move to remove our protective branch of our system, the military, to tally off and off you go to go and help all those European nut jobs that have done nothing but fight us tooth and nail because the people have said, piss off, we don't want to be part of your global corporation. We have enough with our own corporation down at Chalker, Westminster. So thanks but no thanks would be my appraisal of this situation. The remarks came at a time when General Saunders will be leading the smallest British army in the last 300 years after government cut the force to 73,000 troops. Yeah, but there's probably about 2 or 3 million left all over Civvy Street, you know what I'm saying? So what we don't want is that this Johnny-come-latelys to pull you back in to this shit. You all need to recognise that you're better off staying here because there's going to be some serious crap that they're going to attempt to activate during this time, okay? And I'm telling you now, this is what they're doing. I can see it beginning to build. You know, people, certain factions of our society now who are bursting at the seams to express the real character and lord it all over those white donkeys and the black guys. You know what I'm saying? The very people who are by far the most difficult to control. Why? Well, because this is why the West has to be destroyed in relation to power. And that is this. We, collectively, have released ourselves from the bondage of religion. Okay? Not because we don't hold the morals in our regard, but because we've all seen what it is, especially after Vatican II. Okay? It's no longer about love, neighbourhood, brotherhood, it's about authority. That's why the Catholics left the Catholic Church in this swathes from the 1970s. Yeah, this is what's happened. They've left. We've left. We are searching for our inner kingdom, the kingdom of the Father, because we now know it's not going to come out of any of these religions. In fact, the opposite is coming out of these religions, because they're purporting and expressing hatred, pure hatred, racial garbage, the lot, everything, and then throwing it on us. And the numpties, the fruit bats, are taking it on as some kind of guilt. Forget the guilt. The guilt belongs to the empire. They want you to forget it. Let them have it. Throw it on them. We're trying to find our inner kingdom, which has given the elite or the priesthood an opportunity to divert us off into every direction you can imagine, so that we don't find our inner kingdom. That's exactly what's happened, demolishing the family, etc. I don't need to go off. We know what's going on. This now is getting exceptionally dangerous because of the influx we've had through this last couple of years. And now they want to shift our military out. They're also talking about destroying the parachute regiment, okay? Right. Forget its history and all that. We're just dealing with, right now, the fact that these systems are there, we pay for them to protect our nation, not to run off protecting Prussian interests in Europe, okay? Which, again, is just to destroy Europe and also to destroy Russia. All white nations, have you noticed? You know, you need to keep on board with this stuff, Pat, because this is reality. This is what is going on right now everywhere, okay? And while you're watching the TV, you're sucked into the garbage, you're not seeing what you need to be seeing, you're being diverted, all the while destroying yourselves, you're being encouraged to destroy yourselves. They don't want you to travel anymore. You can see with all the chaos that they're creating. You know, are you telling me a company that runs the airports is unable all of a sudden to actually employ people to do what needs to be done with the baggage? Well, the television's telling you that, and the retards are believing it. But me, being a grown-up male, says, fuck that for a game of soldiers. It's complete and utter garbage. Nobody could be that inept at all. It's just not happening, you know, at that kind of level of society where you're working in these organisations. So everything for me is now deflecting away from the fact they are about to try and move America's might into Europe, our beautiful British Isles into Europe. Okay? Again. And look at the changes they did when the Second World War, when all our lot were off, and the same in the First World War when they actually annihilated all our men. This is upon us again. And now you've just seen that face. That mug there, that face, is not anything to do with England, with Scotland, with Wales. This mind works for the enemy. See, people, know it. So, let's have a look. It says the 56-year-old, he's only a year older than me. See, I don't know, what's going on here. Our generation, my generation, we are the only generation that's seen what was and have not been programmed fruit bat like all these younger generations below us. If we don't get our shit together right now, my generation, Generation X, all is lost. And that's not just here, that's in America, that's in Europe. We are the generation that are not as fruit bat as the baby boomers, and we're nowhere near as fruit bat as the offspring. Although I know a lot of you fruit bats and retards that are going to be offered this next round of nonsense, you've programmed your kids, you've allowed your children to tell you what to do, which is just ridiculous, but that's the situation we find ourselves in. So I'm talking to the you Generation X, and not only that, there's a lot of young ones that are actually wide awake. I'm saying to you guys, you all need to start reckoning with reality, what's going on, and not what the media and the chimp hip-hop music is telling you to focus to. Yeah, it's essential. The 50-year-old has previously commanded in operations in Northern Ireland, Kosovo, Iraq and Afghanistan. So he's guarded heroin, he's been part of mass murder in Iraq, and Kosovo was probably the biggest cock-up in relation to destroying Europe, cohesion, and served nothing other than a NATO centre for arms dealing, bringing all this opium in to Europe. That's what he's been involved with. So if this guy's a general, he knows a little bit more about what's really going on, and he loves it. And now he wants all you boys out there to go and join him on another happy adventure to kill a load more white honkies. Interesting. He has also promised to accelerate plans to modernise the army and to deploy overseas more often to respond swiftly to crises. Well, we used to have that, you madhead. It was called 5th Airborne. You remember? When we actually had a force to be reckoned with, you know? And of course, who did that involve? Well, always 2 regiments of the Paras, okay? I wonder why they want to get rid of the Paras. What's going on here? Not good. We don't like it. I don't like it. Rambo doesn't like it. We don't like it. Simple as that. The remarks of the British Army Chief reflect the overall sentiment of Europe in the backdrop of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Does it? Europeans are shitting themselves because they've no gas now, but that's their own fault because they joined in with the bombshell down in Westminster, that Sleepy Joe over in America, and all the other fruit bats running the corporations across Europe. So not good, not good. UK neighbours Finland and Sweden have already shed their military neutrality and are already close to clinching membership of the US-led NATO military alliance. Well, they're easier to bag for this because the simple fact is they've been blocking the Bolsheviks from entering their lands for a very long time. So they're easily excited to let's go and snot Russia. When, as I've said, the majority of the Bolsheviks have actually shifted over into China. So you're not actually, or are you actually fighting Bolsheviks today when you're looking at Russia? No, you're fighting Prussia. Just another branch of the same. They're going to control it all. The move is expected to receive a blowback from Russia, which had started the invasion after Ukraine expressed similar interests. Well, yeah, I think Russia's not going to be really happy if it thinks it's just going to be coming up against a shed load of blighty boys. You know what I'm saying? It's not good, it's not good, none of it's good. I don't like it. So, anyway, that's that. So, I don't think I want to do that one now. No, this is what I want to be doing. So I don't know whether you've read this report. I put this up during the week, but it helps to expand and cement what I've been talking about. When we talk about Prussia, we talk about the fact that the Jesuits, once they were after they were kicked out of the Vatican and then reinstated in the early 1800s, are nothing to do with the Vatican or Rome or the Church or what we class as Christianity. It's everything to do with this Prussian force. And they actually were invited into Russia itself. Then they took over the Khazarian, etc. We've gone through all that. So what I'd like to go through now is just this report of what I put together. Now, I've took most of it from John Coleman because he is the man that gave us the data that explains so much of how this shadow force has basically took over everything in the West. Now, just before we go on to that, just to bring Jason's work in again, just listening to one of his podcasts this week, he was saying that one of his subscribers had actually sent in some data that expanded this idea that the last Phoenix event was 1902. But what it shines a light on is the fact that if you look at the 1800s, it was all about building militaries and building them up and building them up. And then, of course, when you build these militaries, you have to start putting them to some kind of use. So we had the Crimea. I mean, of course, we had the Napoleonic Wars, but that I'm talking about after that. The Crimea, and then we also had the Boer Wars, etc., etc., and all the other wars that were carried out as the empire was expanding. But what this guy actually gave him was information that sort of puts out the fact that the Rockefellers in 1901 upstate and said they'd gone on a retreat. And if you look at the a lot of the big moves high up in the what you class as the Committee 300s realm, from the 1890, what they'd also done in that 1800s, as well as militarily, was also scoop back up all the wealth that had been put out into the world. And the 1800s was doing that in a big way. So that by the time you get to the 1890s, they've sort of pulled all this wealth in. They've got full monopoly and control over everything. This is in the 1800s. Pulling it all in and then disappearing away from everything. So they've sucked all the shit out, the money, the wealth. Everybody's in poverty across the world, which you can find when you're looking at the recruitment for the First World War and even the Boer War. What they found here in Blighty, that all the males, and most of them, were unfit for battle. They all had rickets. They were malnutritioned. You know, they weren't getting vitamin D because the sun was blocked because of all the sort of the Industrial Revolution, etc., etc. Yeah, a bit like what's probably going on in China and in big parts of India. You block the sun, you don't get vitamin D, you're going to get rickets. And there's a rise of that now today because they're blocking the sun. I watched them the other morning. We were red hot. All of a sudden, they were out going crazy across the sky, and then we had a white sky for the rest of the day. And then at the evening, it starts to perk up a bit, and you get to see blue sky again. And then out they come again, and just white out the sky so that there's no sunshine getting through. We're not getting vitamin D. There's also info now that's suggesting that most of the people that succumbed to this madness that we've just experienced are all found to have very, very low vitamin D levels. So that could well be a factor to be considered in relation to how well you're going to cope if you pick up this bug. Anyway, back to the 1890s. So it looked like from the 1890s, all these elites that had monopolised everything, but still had the militaries, were disappearing. Gone. Now, the Rockefellers announced it in 1901, and that was it. 1902 happened. 1902 happened, and what they were planning for didn't carry out the event they were expecting. And so they relaunched everything that we know today, all these huge mammoth corporations, all these huge mammoth foundations, activated all these secret societies again into this new script and put all the money back into the system. Why? Well, if you go with Jason's work, they were prepping for the 138 return Phoenix cycle, the Red Dragon, yeah? If you go back in other traditions, Typhon, again, all these referencing the Thunderbird in the Native American. So they were waiting and expecting this huge catastrophe off this 138 cycle, which happened in 1902. It didn't happen as they expected. So they had to come back out of their underground bases and recapture control again over the next 138 years, which takes us to 2040. And again, they've built up the militaries. We've had the two wars. We quite possibly have had the Third World War because it was suggested it was a quiet war and they were celebrating its 25th anniversary, if you remember in a document we looked at, in the 70s. Yeah? So this could all just be wind and piss just to get our soldiers out of our nations again, while they cause havoc via the police in our nations. Yeah? We're not going to be able to... That's when you get UN coming in to help, because our militaries are over, blah, blah, blah. So it is important that we get a grip of this new Supreme General of the British Forces. It's not good. So what he's basically saying off this new data is that the 20th century, again, has been to put out the cash again, rebuild another system, and then they're pulling it back again, aren't they, on monopoly? Capitalism and communism, each of them in turn, pull in monopoly, don't they, to these families. Doesn't matter whether it's to the state, they control the state through the corporate side of it now, and capitalism as a private endeavour, again, they're monopolising everything that way too. So when the capitalist corporations are then controlling the state that the communist regimes pulled all the power into, you can see now clearly that, as I say many times, that coin of left and right, communism v capitalism, is in fact just two sides of the same coin, and it's flipped by the same bankers. Okay? So, now, back to what I've suggested in previous videos, that why would they be getting rid of all the populations like they are? Simple. A bit like they did in the 1800s. You know, the Industrial Revolution was from the 1700s and in the 1800s, and then it spread to other nations. It didn't need to be as intense here as it was, because this is where it started. But Germany became the next sort of supreme engineering industrialist nation. A lot of which were how they managed to persuade people at our levels and in industry that we might need to be going to war with Germany, and then we got the First World War. So that all fits in as well. But so basically what they're doing, in my opinion, and this hopefully adds to what Jason has put forward, is that they're expecting, again, because they obviously don't know when this great destruction is coming on. They know it comes with these 138-year cycles, but they don't know when it's going to happen, which we get in scripture, that no man will know. You know, people will be trading, people will be getting married, etc., etc., because nobody knows when it comes, okay? But they're terrified of it because this great apocalypse is all about... People think the apocalypse... And I commented on a Facebook image of an old artist who shows the four horsemen, and they're attacking the peasants. That's a complete misunderstanding of the term apocalypse and how it is context in relation to scripture. It's the elites that are terrified of the apocalypse, because the apocalypse is the great revealer. The revealer of the reality that we're living in. Not the fable that we've been encouraged to live under. It's the elites that are terrified of the apocalypse. The revealing. The apocalypse isn't the Armageddon. You know, the elite insider said we're not at the end times, and I don't think we are at the end times. We're coming up to another 138 Phoenix cycle, yes, but whether it's going to be as destructive as they're expecting, but they can't take the risk. They always have to work in this way because they want to make sure that when they come back, they're still in control. And the best way to give them the ease of that intent is to pull down the populations before the event to a level that will definitely be manageable when they come back out of the underground systems. So you may think and suggest then this money monopoly that we're pulling in right now will be to expand this underground world that they've got going on. We've discussed tunnels before on here, you know. You're all aware of Area 51. You're all well aware that there's a lot of data to suggest that these military bases they've got going underground are massive, and they interconnect with some, is it Mach 2 tunnels with these anti-gravity shuttles whizzing around, which is why they got rid of Concorde. Or they got rid of Concorde because they've got a plane for themselves that goes out the atmosphere and can get to America from London in 30 minutes. I don't know these things. You know, there's a lot of suggestions, but it never made sense that they got rid of Concorde unless it meant that they had another method of travelling as fast as they could over to the US. So yeah, it all sort of makes sense, really. And you know, the more I look at Jason's work, these are interviews that he's doing are interesting because you get a lot more of a compact narrative of him as to where he's at with what he's thinking. And I did have questions before. He's answered them questions, to be quite frank. In the affirmative, I'm quite happy with them. So I'm exceptionally, you know, absorbed in his work still as it goes, and he's doing a bloody good job, to be honest. So let's just have a look at what you lot you've done in your week, and then we'll get on to this, what I put up this week. So I'm quiet. Well, nobody else seems to think I'm quiet, so I think it might be something to do with your system there, Debbie. You might want to get yourself some speakers for it or something. Plug it into your Wi-Fi and auxiliary. Just take the put one into the back of your PC and stick it into your auxiliary on your Wi-Fi, and you can get it through your speakers that way. So somebody else can say, well, I don't know why it's quiet. It doesn't make sense because let me check this. Let me check the volumes on sound preferences. Just let me check that there's nothing altered up here. Oh, input volume. Now, why is that like? How's that? Is that getting any better? Can somebody just answer whether that's got a lot better? Because I have actually just turned up the input volume quite considerably. So, right, excellent. So I must have gremlins again in the old PC anyway. So, alright folks, hello, short, you fine, loud, clear, excellent, sound very low, move close to the mic, alright, mute, Barbara, I've got it right up to my ear. Well, that's weird. Has it improved some now, or what? Good evening, Sean, brothers and sisters. Well, I've turned that up. If that hasn't altered it, then it's probably maybe out of my hands. But I've got on my mixer here in Streamlabs, I've got it, I've never had it as I'll put it up even further. I'll put it right to the top. So hopefully that's made a bit of a difference. Evening, Paul. Better than right up somewhere else? Well, yes. The best vintage. What leaves an aftertaste in the back of the throat? What does? A 69-year-old Gen X? You're not a Gen X, you're naughty. You mean you've got the character and the mindset? Yes, well, there's nothing wrong with that. But then having said that, I mean, I grew up with Gen X, obviously, and I knew that a lot of them were retarded at school. Little silly things amused them. Just stupidity. There was nothing serious about them, really. So it's across all generations, but I do aggravate the baby boomers because, you're still there. A lot of you are the middle class, and that's what they're aiming to destroy. If you don't get off your ass now and reckon with the fact that you've had a fucking easy life and it's time you put something back in there, you're not going to get any respect from me. I don't care who you are. More mate, not into that. The next is zombies then aliens. Well, yeah, they're definitely pushing this alien thing, aren't they? It's all distractions. It's just distractions, everything. Because you look at the Quiet War plan, and the plan is to attack the populations from within their own borders with all this technology. Yeah. So, saying all fine. Greetings. Joining the dots. Hello. L1. Yes, hello. Yeah, alright, you can hear good. Bingo. Well, okay, that's good. Right, so something's happened. So it's deafening now, is it? Well, just turn your volume down a bit, chaps. Or if I turn this one down. Right, so it looks like whatever I did in the... So I don't know why that's gone down. Some gremlins, obviously. Taking the Michael. Right, so that's good. 5 times 5. Yes, we will all turn ours... Yeah, okay. That's a bit too much gain. Right, well, I've turned it down slightly again on here, so it might have got a bit distorted. What do you think about these mad sunsets? It's crazy, Well, it's difficult. I mean, we are moving into different times altogether. Everything's changing. The moon came up and went down, I noticed, last year in a different place. And apparently that we noticed it across the world just the one night. And then it went back to normal. So what are we seeing? Is the programming breaking down? Or are you getting a lot more deja vu, which is showing that you've changed something on your path? There's a lot of things going on here that are not getting picked up by the retards because they're fixed in a very low frequency, but there's very strange things going on. And I don't class them as strange because obviously when you're in the shamanic kind of things, what they're teaching you to do is don't brush things off that you see, you feel, you experience. Focus to them as real and try and understand them. So that's how I've operated for a very long time. So strange, maybe not. I just recognise when there are things. I've been getting a strange feeling. It's weird. And I've had this before, but me hip, one of my hips, it just feels like sometimes it's picking up some kind of frequency. And I think it's because many, many moons ago, when I was a youngster, my father made me have, what do they call it, a tetanus in that leg. And I weren't impressed. Seriously not impressed. But it does seem to be, that was the only thing I can think of as to why I could be getting some kind of nonsense going on there. I don't know though. But I've been getting that all week. The ringing in the ear stuff and the feeling of a big energy. Again, I'm still getting a lot of that. A lot of that. So I just enjoy it, mate. I just look at it and I'm enjoying it. You know, I'm here for the ride. And do as much to improve things as I can. I'm not necessarily here to shit myself and get too concerned about the strange happenings in the world. I quite like them. I think it's quite good. So that's how I see it. I'm not bothered. I don't shit myself. I just, you know, I mean, like I've said, if I'm getting kicks off, I'll just get on highest point and watch it. And I'll be enthralled in watching it. I won't shat myself. Because I already know I'm not getting out of here alive. Or the body is not getting out of here alive. There's a delay in the chat, is there? Right, where you are, okay. We're living in an interactive video game. Yeah, as advertised. You know, this is nothing new. This is what I was pouring at when I've left the mystery school. And what I like about Jason is he's just talking the same crap I had on my old websites. It was full of it, the occult stuff, because I was full of it when I come out of the mystery school. So no matter what I did, when I wrote it or whatever, I always dragged the occult side of things into it some way or another. Because that's what I was full of after the 7 years. But I've always said, there's no aliens. There may have been one time way back when there were an influx from an outside thing, because you get that in the 5 Nitus, etc., from Egypt. You also get it in other traditions. But I've said it many times and wrote it copiously. In my opinion, it has always been these returning after the flood. It was nothing of the sort, aliens. Nothing of the sort. It was the elites that had buried themselves in whatever and survived and then come out with the technologies again and reformed the world into their own image so they could carry on controlling it. And there's no different now. This is exactly what they're doing. It's exactly what they're doing. They want the militaries. Yeah, they don't need any ants, you just need the militaries. That's all they need when they go into these underground bases, so they can come back out after how many years it takes before the atmosphere sort of subsides or they feel safe. And now they come with the machines and the technology, and you know, if it's been time, most of the people born there are going, oh my God, you're the gods. No, they're not. And I wrote that many, many moons ago. A lot, you know. Got lower back muscle 4 weeks now. Wake up with night in pain. Can only sleep in one position. It's a nightmare. Right, well, let me say another thing, and this is the advice I give to everybody. And again, I'm not giving medical advice. I'm just presenting to you how I deal with things. Now, I'd had a knee problem for about 3 years. And honestly, I really got to a point where I thought I was going to have a spastic knee. Because I just thought it's plastering. I was plastering for so long. You're up and down them ladders, you won't believe how many times. You know, it's ridiculous. And the knees on plasters are what tend to go. And this went on for 3 years. And then all of a sudden I thought I'd sussed it, because I used to put my phone in a pocket around my knee and I took it off. And I didn't get the pain. And I thought, So I was telling everybody, oh my God, it could be this phone, it could be having an effect on my knee, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, maybe a year after that, it came back. And I thought, well, I haven't had my phone in there all this time. It can't be my phone. So anyway, I went to osteopath. And he's fanning around like they do. And 2 vertebrae at the top of my back were slightly out. And it's with skimming ceilings. So obviously before, when it stopped, whatever I'd done skimming ceilings, I'd put right again with whatever else I would do. I might have been doing joinery for 6 months after that, or plumbing, or whatever. Whatever I did after that, put them back. So anyway, it started again, and I'd gone to see this guy, and he put 2 vertebrae back into place at the top of my back. Knee gone. Back to normal. But, I kid you not, if I'd have been thick and gone to see a doctor, they'd have probably said, you need a new knee. And I'd have probably, if I was thick, like proper retarded, I'd have probably said, yeah, okay, and gone and had one. And it was nothing to do with anything apart from 2 vertebrae slightly out, putting my spine out, putting pressure on my knee, that it didn't like. You know? Also, when it comes with my hip, sitting down on these chairs in front of this computer does not do my hips any good whatsoever. And I've been having a bit of problems with that this week again. So I'm out walking because it's the only thing. If you're sat down on your ass, you've got to get out and do some walking. Otherwise, you're going to come into some serious problems when you get up past 22, like me. You know what I'm saying? Well, actually, I'm 22 next time. So, God, I don't even know how old I am myself. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, so always, if you've got a problem with your hips, if you've got a problem with your knees, your ankles, or anything, go and see an osteopath. Because there's a damn good chance your spine's out slightly and putting pressure where it doesn't like it. So that's what I do. DMSO and magnesium. Is that to help with sleeping? No. Right. So this is what I put together this week, and it does actually help people that are not so savvy with so much of this data about Committee 300, the Prussians, blah 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 blah, the Jesuits, all this stuff, the takeover of Rome, because that's what I see has happened, and we've been led to believe that this happened millennia ago when I don't believe it did. I think they've pushed all this change on what was Rome, maybe in the last 300 or 400 years, even maybe in the last 200 years. Otherwise, it would never have survived for as long as it did. So this is what I put together. It's not massively long. I won't bore you to death with it, but it does put it into perspective. Just what? Oh, so it's playing up again. So I don't know why it does that. It should not play up because I've already set it up. So here we go. I'll just have to... Right, so... Here we go. Done and transition. So here we go. So it says, understanding the World Economic Forum and the United Nations, because of course most people think it is just that Klaus Schwab. Is it heck? He's just a gobshite who'd been mentored by Kissinger for time. His dad were SS. It's just the same old bunch of nut jobs, but Kissinger being the key. So, understanding the World Economic Forum and the United Nations says today we all better understand the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, and its arm, the World Health Organization. Last weekend at a global health meeting at the WEF finished the events as a laughingstock of lies, dementia and outright hubris. But what is this band of merry murderers, and how did we arrive at today? It's the Committee of 300. This is important that people get this. The Committee of 300 is a global committee that administers the will of the new Venetian Party of the North, which is made up of black nobility aristocrats based in Venice, and yet spread across the entire globe as overt monarchs, premiers, and those that are unseen but hold the power of command. The Committee of 300, although in existence for over 180 years, did not take on its present form until around 1897. It was always given to issuing orders through front, such as the Royal Institute for International Affairs, and then you've got the Royal Society, you know, the Fabians. All these big institutions are all part of this, and this came out of the East India companies, all of it. So the Committee of 300 were formulated through the invasions and colonisations carried out by the Committee of 300, using the British Empire as a front, since the Hanoverians got onto the stage, or onto the English throne. So, and they always put this through front. The Royal Institute for International Affairs is highly important because it's Chatham House, which is also Tavistock. Of course, the Tavistock is a branch of the Royal Institute for International Affairs, or RIIA, as it's abbreviated. The RIIA founded the Tavistock Institute, which in turn created NATO, and a myriad of groups, institutions, think tanks, banks, and most importantly, the military-industrial complex. And there's a link to that there, so that gives you an insight to what big organisations make that up. Lockheed Martin, RAND, Raytheon, all these huge mammoth corporations, Incatel, you know, all these are part of this, make up this military. IBM, you know, ARC, Absolute Return for Kids, all this education stuff, military-industrial complex. We used to talk about this a lot 12, 13 years ago. It seemed to get lost after they introduced the flat Earth and sort of tottled off so many of the good researchers back in 2014. The head of the committee is the Black Nobility Queen. Notice, I'll say that again. The head of the committee is the Black Nobility Queen, comma, that we know as Elizabeth II. She's not the English Queen. She's an acclaimed Queen, and she's the Queen of the Committee of 300 for the Black Nobility. She's an acclaimed monarch sitting off the English throne, taking instead the chair of the estate. So she's the Queen of Persons. Yeah? The chair of the estates. Persons, how they've captured your estate. Yeah? She sits at the chair of the estates. The chair of persons. Yeah? All works in together when you start to grasp the grammar that I've been putting out for the last couple of years, and many others as well. Of course, I mix it up with law, the biblical stuff. You know what I'm saying? I try and mix it up that way. Because you can take the biblical script in so many different ways. Esoterically, you can take it in law, you can take it in as a physical reality, as history. All sorts of different ways that bunch of data can be understood. Her line will cement this deception. So, everything Queen Elizabeth II has done, the changes they've created while she didn't sit on the throne but just blagged you that she were, while really pulling in all the persons on your estates, that when she's gone and this return of the king, which is what I keep blagging on about, they're going to take this change and shift and cement it in this oath. And you're all going to suck on it because you don't know your ass from your elbow. Yeah? Her line will cement this deception. So her line isn't our line. It's Black Nobility, Venetian stuff. The Guelphs, the worst of the Black Nobility line. That's who they are. Her line will cement this deception if nothing is done to stop it. Elizabeth II rules over a vast network of closely linked corporations that never pay tax and are answerable to no one. And they fund their research institutions through foundations whose joint activities have almost total control over our daily lives, which they do, and the media. Yeah? The committee, so now we're dealing with what is this committee and what's its theology, as it were. The committee appears to base much of its important decisions affecting mankind on the philosophy of Polish aristocrat Felix Dzerzhinsky. And there's a picture of him above. Yeah, hammer and sickle. Bolshevism. Who regarded mankind as being slightly above the level of cattle. As a close friend of British intelligence agent Sidney Riley, but yet Riley was actually Dzerzhinsky's controller during the Bolshevik Revolution's formative years. Yeah, so there you've got British intelligence, which isn't anything to do with England or Great Britain. It's East India, Prussian intelligence operator, calling himself British intelligence agent. Okay, so he was in control of this Dzerzhinsky, which is what the Committee of 300 base their foundation on. You know, like the charter. He often confided in Riley during his drinking bouts. Dzerzhinsky was, of course, the beast who ran the Red Terror apparatus. So the Red Terror apparatus is what was killing everybody in Russia. Yeah? Anybody that went against it. A bit like what Hitler, according to some books of the time, worked for. He was a Bolshevik spy, spying on everything in Germany for the Bolsheviks. So that's one set of data that I've studied in the past. Christopher Berkness, I think, is a guy who puts it out on YouTube videos or has written books about it. I think we've discussed him before early on. However, he is an uber right-wing fruit bat. Maybe. We have to be careful. I don't know. The Aspen Institute, the Committee of 300 holds as a prime core of their economic policy the ideas largely based on the teachings of Malthus. So the economic policy is based on Malthus. Well, he was a complete psychopath. And he was the son of an English country parson, so probably a Puritan, who was pushed to prominence by the British East India Company. So Malthus was pushed to prominence by the British East India Company. So his entire script is British East India Company, yeah, which is the Committee of 300, yeah. The Prussians, the Venetians, that's who this is. The Aspen Institute, Colorado, is the Committee of 300's head office in the United States. Before the First Gulf War. Now this is interesting because not a lot of people know this. But I've come across this years ago anyway, so it's not something new, but I had forgotten. He says, before the first Gulf War, so that's Daddy Boy George Bush, Thatcher's on the throne, remember, the CEO of the corporate government UK. Before the first Gulf War, George Herbert Walker Bush was hesitating on having America invade the Gulf. So all of a sudden it's come up from British intelligence and Mossad, we must invade Iraq. George Daddy Bush is saying, fuck that for a game of soldiers, we don't want to be sending our guys over into Iraq. So he weren't happy. And his unhappiness was met with orders being directly vocalised to him at the aforementioned institute, which is Aspen Institute, Colorado, by Prime Minister of the UK, Margaret Thatcher. So, in no uncertain terms, Bush was ordered to muster support for the invasion. So, Maggie Thatcher was handling George Bush during her term on behalf of the Privy Council. Okay? Maggie Thatcher. You know, the one that filled all the baby boomers that she was amazing and fantastic. No, she wasn't. Okay? Bertrand Russell wrote a paper called The Impact of Science on Society, the start of the depopulation agenda from which the committee birthed the Club of Rome, which pushed a paper called the Zero Growth Post-Industrial Plan for Industry and Agriculture for the United States of America. So you've got Malthus, and we've got the Polish aristocrat Dzerzhinsky, who is in fact MI6's Sidney Riley, two parts of what make up the Committee 300's theology. And now we've got Bertrand Russell, who was another elite Milner Group kind of guy, Cecil Rhodes Round Table Society, which all this is back. The Round Table's behind a lot of all this. So they've got one of his papers, The Impact of Science on Society, and the Club of Rome was born. The Club of Rome runs everything climate, environmentalism, yeah, that's which is then the Malthus eugenics, you know, getting rid of the populations, yeah. This is what the Committee 300 is all about. It administers this agenda for the hidden aristocracy, for which the Rothschilds are only the court financiers. Yeah? That's why you find them in everything. So Thatcher basically ordered George Daddy Bush to get off his ass and get cracking on the propaganda to muster support for the invasion of Iraq, the first Gulf War in the 1990s. In 1990, it says Bertrand Russell. We've now got Bertrand Russell, and then the committee of the Club of Rome, which pushed the paper, the Zero Growth Post-Industrial Plan for the Industry and Agriculture for the United States of America. The paper said, so I hope you Americans are listening, because this is what Trump's a part of. In this paper, it said that the middle class had to be destroyed because they are a stumbling block to the New World Order. So the middle class in this paper is designated for destruction, okay, in the United States. And here, it's going to happen here now as well. Because the middle class had the money and would be able to buy the more expensive American goods, which meant they weren't going to buy the committee's new playground and new corporation, China. So all these imports that came in from China were forced on to America by basically destroying the capability of the middle class to carry on purchasing made in America. They did that here in Blighty with Japanese imports. Yeah, because when I were a kid, all my granddad went on about were Japanese imports, the little copy in yellow. It weren't nice. We're not going to even repeat it. But nothing on the language to any race outside England by my grandfather, one of my grandfathers, was groovy. It was outrageous, you know, and everybody just go, "Oh, granddad," or "Oh, dad," and it was like, "No, granddad, you're a fucking lunatic. You're a dick." You know. Anyway, let's not get into that. So that was it, and so they did it here by throwing in, made in England and destroyed by thrusting in Japanese imports. America, it was China, and I mean probably the Japanese as well. So that's just a bit of history on that as well. In this paper, it said the middle class have done that, blah, 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 blah. This was to be accomplished by crushing the industries within the United States They began with the destruction of the steel industry. Okay, and they did. Same here. All moved out to India, China, all over that side. Now then, President Jimmy Carter. Okay, James Earl Carter accepted this new idea as official United States policy. Yeah, so Jimmy Carter accepted the policy of the Committee of 300 coming out of the Club at Rome, that it was a great idea to destroy the middle class in America and begin the destruction of American industry, made in America. Right? This is the real meaning to what they call free trade, NAFTA and GATT. And this is what John Coleman was going mad about. The doors to genocide were open wide because of these trade agreements. Okay, they launched Global 2000, so that's now this. They launched this before 2000. It was the aim for 2000, coming out of the Malthus things, which called for the destruction of 2/3 of the global population by 2050. Right, and there you could then say that the 2050 is working in sync with their expected real big disastrous kind of thing that happens to the earth. And again, so they're waiting for a 240 move over by the Phoenix. Jason suggests from his deductions that it's going to affect Asia more than it's going to affect the West. But then there's another in 2046, but the big one comes in 2050, and he cites Nostradamus, Edgar Cayce, and a lot of all the guys that I've studied intensely back in the day. So I can't fault his thesis on it, you know. So they launched Global 2000 and called for so this is under President Carter's thing is, yeah. So this is 70s. They pulled together They launched Global 2000, which called for the destruction of 2/3 of the global population by 2050. They pulled together this Bertrand Russell's and H.G. Wells' findings that they released in papers that the world was going to be so overpopulated it'd be a terrible place to live. Well, yeah, for the elite. Okay, it's going to be a terrible place for the elite to live in because it's going to be full of us-nut jobs. Now then, Robert Strange McNamara. Strange, yeah? We've looked at the Strange clan, haven't we? You know, the Odd Fellows. Who the origins of it was the House Strange. House Stanley. The Stanleys here. The Earls of Derby. The fronts for the older Roman Empire. The ones that installed the Tudors. Yeah, so we've looked at this Strange. Well, here we have Robert Strange McNamara, which we have a picture of him below. So Robert Strange McNamara, the Club of Rome and Lucius member, so he was a member of the Club of Rome and the Lucius Trust, which was originally the Lucifer Trust, by the way, took up the mantle and called a meeting of all the bankers and financiers to a great meeting, in which he insisted that the biggest threat to the world was the middle class and overpopulation. And then from that meeting came AIDS. Okay, so from that set up and persuading the financiers and bankers, they launched AIDS. And we've discussed this time before. Everything that's happened in the last 2.5 years is now being channeled into this existing AIDS industry. Yeah, that's what they've just done. So all this money that they've siphoned off has basically gone into the AIDS industry. So wherever it goes from there, eventually siphoning off to the elite, that's what's happening now. So they've shifted this whole new nonsense into an existing industry. It's HIV, which of course HIV still has not been isolated in the proper manner. And the guy who isolated it said that to you the minute he'd done it. However, that seems to be bypassing the intelligent people, so-called. So let's get an idea of this Robert Strange. He said, the commitment of government to deal with the population is of course essential. There are many ways to make the death rate increase. And that's Robert McNamara, Secretary of State, New Solidarity, March 30th. You see, this Secretary of State is an important position, as we're going to see as we move through this. Scientists engaged in the process of conditioning are called social engineers, or new science social scientists, or new science social scientists. And they play an integral part in what we see, hear and read. The old school social engineers were Kurt K. Lewin, Professor Hadley Cantrill, and Margaret Mead, Professor Derwin Cartwright, and Professor Lipset. Now, anybody that's touched any kind of MK Ultra and the 60s hippie, all that controlled by entertainment, will have heard of Lewin and Margaret Mead. And Lipset, who together with John Rawlings Rees made up the backbone of New Science scientists at the Tavistock Institute. Okay, Tavistock Institute, remember, created NATO. John Rawlings Rees used some 80,000 First World War soldiers and captives to do the game. This is before the death camps of Hitler. This is John Rawlings Rees doing it. Sir John Rawlings Rees, of course, as he became. Having now witnessed the physical expression of these social sciences firsthand since 2020, so I'm saying, like, now you've got an idea how they work, we also have the ability, if you're awake, to see how the Epstein network plays into the forcing of the pseudoscience that has built the narrative of the World Economic Forum and the entire web of the United Nations to cajole the populations into medical suicide in readiness for the reset. Well, Epstein specifically and Savile and these networks, they have been out there to blackmail the positions, the people that hold the positions that they needed to shove this pseudoscience in for this load of garbage and the H1N1 garbage 2008-2009. So that's where your Epstein networks come into play. Savile, etc. They're the ones that hold the shit on the people. They're the ones blackmailing all the people that they needed to force this pseudoscience into everything, into the media, into education, the films, the books, everything, the New Age madness that were released in 2000, all the corporations, etc. Started with Blair in 97, with his Fruit Bat United system that he put in. So that's just to go. So they've just done it again now, again into medical suicide in readiness for this reset. So they want less and less people there, so that if it does kick off in 240, they're coming back and there's not many people that they have to deal with to regain control and start it again. The Club of Rome was put together in 1968 from hardcore members of the original Morgenthau group on the basis of a telephone call made by the late Aurelio Pesce for a new and urgent drive to speed up the plans of the One World Government. Because before it were New World Order, it were always called One World Government. Yeah, so that's what we grew up with, the idea called One World Government. Now, the Club of Rome was created in 1968, and it's an offshoot of the Round Table, yeah, which is the Committee of 300. The Round Table, I would say, stands at the top. The Committee of 300 is the administrator over everything that comes beneath. Yeah, the Round Table. So that's United Nations, it's your Bilderberg Group, etc., etc. Pesce's call was answered by the most subversive future planners drawn from the United States, France, Sweden, Britain, Switzerland and Japan that they could muster. During the period 1968 to 72, the Club of Rome became a cohesive entity of new scientists, globalists, future planners and internationalists of every stripe. So this is your CFR, Council on Foreign Relations, yeah? This is your Rockefeller Foundation. All these big, massive foundations have got it to the point in the 70s that they could put it all together under the Club of Rome. As one delegate put it, we became Joseph's coat of many colours. Pesce's book, Human Quality, formed the basis of the doctrine adopted by NATO's political wing. So, the Club of Rome, again, is a part of NATO's political wing. Well, actually, no. NATO's part of the Club of Rome's wing, so yeah. Anyway. The Club of Rome is a conspiratorial umbrella organisation, a marriage between Anglo-American financiers and the old black nobility families of Europe, which are the Venetians. Well, the Venetians have been into our lot for a long, long time. Yeah? We went through Edward III, didn't we? We shafted them to some degree. But he'd already handed over all the sheep economy and other parts of England's economy over to these Venetians. But he did stand up and tell them to piss off, he weren't paying them back. Anyway, that's before the collapse of the Lombardy. Anyway, we'll not rabbit on. a marriage between Anglo-American financiers and the old black nobility families of Europe, particularly the so-called nobility of London, Venice and Genoa. Well, of course, London, after the Civil War and the installation of the Bank of England, is where they moved the centre of the East India Company, its navy and its finance to the inner city of London, which was a temple area. Right? The Club of Rome has its own private intelligence agency and also borrows from David Rockefeller's Interpol. So Interpol is David Rockefeller's own private intelligence operation. Okay, so Rockefeller set that up. Every US intelligence agency cooperates very closely with it. So this is the Club of Rome. So yeah, it's private intelligence agency and Interpol, as does the KGB and the Mossad. Yeah. So it all goes back to MI6, because of course that is the East India Company's intelligence operation. So those are the KGB and the Mossad. The only agency that remained beyond its reach was the East German intelligence service, the Stasi. Now, of course, now that they've got Israel totally in place, the Committee of 300 have put Mossad over and above the British intelligence institutions, the KGB, and all the US intelligence services, because everything's been focused to control in Israel under the Sanhedrin, which we've looked at could possibly be the Sanhedrin itself. So the physical entity, like the inner city, would be in Israel, but then that's going to be demolished, in it. But the real centre is the new Jerusalem, the heavenly Jerusalem, which is the landmass that bad boy Vlad the Impaler is busy pulling off Western forces and into the hands of Russia. So, yeah. So it's pointless going over there to fight Russians, because all that's going to happen is they'll kill you. And it won't be Russians killing you, your own forces will be killing you with all this technology they're going to start using. Just because it's ordained that Vlad gets this. Kissinger's already announced it, you know. He's already also mentioned that Boris has made a mistake. Tells me Boris is on his way out because the Kissinger has spoken. There's a picture of Club of Rome and Aurelio Pesci. Aurelio Pesci once confided in his close friend Alexander Haig that he felt like Adam Weishaupt reincarnated. Pesci had much of Weishaupt's brilliant ability to organise and control the Illuminati of today, and it showed through Pesci's control of NATO. And of course, the Illuminati based itself on the system of the Jesuits. And that's the Jesuits before they became the Prussian Jesuits, yeah? Pesci headed the Atlantic Institute's Economic Council for 3 decades, 30 years, while he was the chief executive officer for Giovanni Agnelli's Fiat Motor Company. Now, Giovanni Agnelli mentored, what's he called? The guy who set up ARC, Absolute Return for Kids, right? So Giovanni Agnelli and the Fiat Motor Company, which when you get into it, was built and financed entirely by American companies. So the entire Fiat Motor City, where they build them all, is actually an American financed operation, right? And they stuck Giovanni Agnelli on top. And he was the mentor to, God, I can't remember his name. I can't remember his name, I will, but it's the guy who set up ARC Absolute Return for Kids, which is a paedophile ring tied into Dutra, yeah? And all the things nasty. And that spearheads the academy agenda. So any time your school turns to academy, whether it's Oasis or any of the others, even though it says it's run by Church of England, no, this is the system it's operating for, okay? The Church of England is no longer of England. It belongs to something freaky and creepy and big ties to Churchill. Because that's who, his private secretary, his little bastard, is the one you've got running it right now. Yeah? So, Pesci headed the of the Fiat Motor Company. Agnelli, a member of the ancient Italian black nobility family of the same name, is one of the most important members of the Committee of 300. He played a leading role in development projects in the Soviet Union. So Agnelli played a big role, his family, in the Soviet Union, building up the Soviet Union, and they've managed to get one of their shlays setting up this entire academy agenda here in Blighty and Europe and further afield. Arc, absolute return for your kids to them. That's how you want to be seeing that. Aurelio Petsic wrote a book entitled The Chasm Ahead. The other book of interest was Zbigniew Brzezinski's Technocratic Era. Brzezinski, slayer of Rockefeller, and despises Russia. Yeah, he mentored Reagan, he mentored Obama. Yeah, he despises everything Russia because that's his role to do so. So he wrote a book called The Technocratic Era. Now, you've probably not read that book, but we read all this stuff 10, 15 years ago because that's what we're flowing out everywhere. At the conference on the transatlantic imbalance and collaboration held at Queen Elizabeth's palatial property in Deauville, France. So they had a conference at one of Queen Elizabeth's palatial properties in Deauville, France. The two aforementioned books, yeah, so that's Aurelio Pesci's The Chasm Ahead and Zbigniew Brzezinski's Technocratic Era, those two books became the thesis for why technological progress in the United States must end. Right? So Aurelio Pesci, Zbigniew Brzezinski and the Queen Elizabeth, they decided those two books were going to be the thesis for why the United States must end. Right? The first Club of Rome's global planning contract went to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Now, I have a full report of MIT on site which shows how through the MIT is how Epstein's network managed to fund the pseudoscience that they then blackmailed everybody to follow. So they were funding all this pseudoscience in MIT. All of it. Yeah, and I have a report that I've made. We'll put that up on this thing, because once you can start to see this network, you can see it today how it is and who they're all working for. And they're not separate operations, all this is one big group of fruit bats with power, because they're smart fruit bats, you know. The first Club of Rome's global planning contract went to the Massachusetts, and that's the premier of the Committee 300's Research Institute. So MIT is Committee 300, but it's one of the premier ones. There's a lot more. Yale, etc. You know, you've got your Skull and Bones, which is the Russells, Bertrand Russell's family's moving of a German lodge into Yale, chapter 322. Yeah, the Russells, of course, being the opium runners back in the day to China, the Clipper stuff, and Charles Taze Russell set up the Jehovah's Witnesses. So this all part of this shindig, all of it. And I've noticed they're using Jehovah's Witnesses to actually attain people's inheritances. It's very clever what they're doing. But now I've put that in your mind, you know, Annie, you might want to keep your eyes out for that. Because they're positioning themselves for that. Pretending to help. And bringing on some shit energy as they do it. The Committee 300 ordered the Club of Rome to use Polish nationalism as a tool to destroy the Catholic Church and pave the way for Russian troops to occupy the country. Or reoccupy the country. The Solidarity movement, which is what I grew up with, well, Lech Wałęsa and all them numpties, the Solidarity movement was a creation of the Committee of 300, Zbigniew Brzezinski, who selected, so that's Rockefeller, remember, he was Rockefeller's little bitch, who selected its office holders and organisers, yeah? So, Brzezinski selected all the office holders and organisers that made up the Solidarity movement in Poland. Most of Solidarity's leaders were descendants of Bolshevik Jews from Odessa. Odessa, of course, is what you've got Vlad the Impaler taking back Bolshevik Jews, all descendants of Bolshevik Jews from Odessa. Yeah? That's what Putin's taking back for this heavenly Jerusalem. So the bigwigs can go back to their home, because they were never, ever part of Israel, the Semitic people. Yeah, you know, they can't be much plainer, they're telling you, if you're awake. And we're not noted for hating communism. So they don't hate communism, these people, they love it. And you know, it's dangerous with a lot of the Poles, because a lot of Poles were took over a long time ago by these this priesthood. That doesn't mean to say I'm saying ill of the Poles, because a lot of them were Catholic, but that I met, but the power there, you know. Bernard Levin below wrote Time, Perspective and Morale, which is a Club of Rome publication concerning how to break down the morale of nations and individual leaders. And here's an extract of the document. This is one of the main techniques for breaking down morale through a strategy of terror consists in exactly this tactic. Keep the person hazy as to where he stands and just what he may expect. In addition, if frequent vacillations between severe disciplinary measures and promise of good treatment, exactly what they've just done to you in the last 2.5 years. To perfection. Yeah? Perfection. Levin is worthy of special mention if for no reason other than his role in undermining Iran, the Philippines, South Africa and Nicaragua, and South Korea. Okay, so this is Levin. He undermined all these nations. He had an hand in it. The Club of Rome was called upon by the Committee 300 to wage war on nuclear energy. Well, you had all your fruit bats in the 80s, didn't you? All your women, all your mad psychopaths that had got divorced and had better to do and went running off, camping outside these nuclear facilities and ended up getting cancer. You know, this is how stupid people were. But when you're breaking up the family, you've got to have something for these psycho women to run off and do. Yeah? So that were a Committee 300 attack on nuclear energy because it's clean. Not only is it clean, you can bathe in the cooling waters of the reactors. I have a video, Galen Whelan, who explains well exactly how health and safety, when first used and pushed into the system, was so on the nuclear industry, and that this entire premise of this new health and safety for nuclear was absolute bollocks. If a nuclear reactor exploded, it would be no different than a boiler from a coal power station exploding. There would be no radiation because it's not using plutonium in the weaponized format, which does give off nuclear radiation. I'll put that up under here as well because it's you need to see these things, you know. The Club of Rome was called upon by Committee to wage war on nuclear energy because with nuclear energy generating electricity and the cheap and abundant supplies, the third world countries would gradually become independent. And they can't have that now, can they? They want to depopulate them, not have them independent. They're obviously keeping in Africa for some kind of old world playground that they can all go and visit with. All the animals still living there, you know. That's why they're sending everybody into Europe, all races, because that's where they're going to destroy it. And like I said, some of our visitors are expressing characteristics that need to be stopped in the tracks, okay? Because it's not acceptable on England. This is all part of it. America takes its orders through the Royal Institute for International Affairs, which is passed on to Morgan Guarantee and Trust Bank on Wall Street. So the orders from London come via the RIIA to the Morgan Guarantee and Trust Bank on Wall Street. Now, the Chief Executive Officer of the organisation relays those orders to the Office of the Secretary of State, who relays those orders to the President. So the orders come via the Secretary of State, and remember, the Secretary of State is chosen by the Committee of 300. Yeah? So it doesn't matter who they get in as President or CEO, it's the Secretary of State that's issuing the orders, yeah? From the RIIA. And of course, the CFR is a branch of the RIIA. You could say it's a copy of the RIIA, but from America's standpoint. So this has been so since 1919. So the Secretary of State has been chosen in America since 1919 by the RIIA, Chatham House. And this has been so since 1919. As such, the Secretary of State is chosen by the Royal Institute. Now, profiling is a technique developed in 1922 on command of the Royal Institute for International Affairs. Major John Rawlins Rees, a British Army technician, was instructed to set up the largest brainwashing facility in the world at the Tavistock Institute for Human Relations as a part of Sussex University. This became the core of Britain's Psychological and Warfare Bureau. Britain's Psychological Warfare Bureau made extensive use of the work done by Rees on his 80,000 British Army World War I guinea pigs, captive soldiers who underwent many forms of testing. It was a Tavistock design methods that got the United States into the Second World War, and which, under the guidance of Dr. Kurt Lewin below, established the OSS, the forerunner of the CIA. So the OSS basically came out of the Tavistock. Yeah? And of course, Tavistock created NATO. Can we see what we're looking at here? And all our soldiers now in the West, who no longer operating for king, queen and country, or the flag, or the constitution, is all operating for the Tavistock through NATO onto the RIA and the Committee of 300. Yeah, the Club of Rome, of course, because that controls NATO, or created it. The RAF under, now this is interesting as well, because there's a lot, anybody that's in the know from my generation above know that Bomber Command could not be seen as anything other than pure evil. Which is why we got the Battle for Britain and the Spitfires, just to put people off the scent. But actually, Bomber Harris was a complete psychopath who loved nothing better than bomb the living shit to civilians. Okay, so the RAF, under the command of Bomber Harris, carried out Lewin's plans. So that's Lewin's plans were what Bomber Harris were carrying out, culminating in the terror firestorm bombing of Dresden, in which over 125,000 people, mainly old men, women and children, were killed in these fire bombings under bombing. So this is where it's coming from. Office of OSS, which is today known as the CIA. Through other fronts, such as the Royal Institute for International Affairs, sorry, I don't know why I've got a full stop there. I might have to recheck that. I think it's supposed to say, and through other fronts, such as the Royal Institute for International Affairs, as World War II drew to a close, NATO ordered Sussex University to establish a very special brainwashing centre, which became part of Britain's Psychological Warfare Bureau. Only now, its research, you get this, only now, so this is after, as World War II drew to a close, only now its research was directed towards civilian rather than military applications. Now, this is where you're getting all your 60s LSD, mind control, MK Ultra from. It's this shift in the Psychological Warfare Bureau moving to civilian applications. Yeah. NATO was tasked to implement the Aquarian Conspiracy, which is the book title of Willis Harman's technical paper. From this paper, while under occupation by NATO, the West accepts its doctrine without being aware that its doctrine exists as a subversive plan. So we're all under the Aquarian Conspiracy, which is what NATO carries out on behalf of the Club of Rome. Yeah? And it's a subversive plan. The fruit of this script shows itself today in such programs that have secured that divorce draws no stigma, suicide is at an all-time high and raises few eyebrows, and social deviations from the norm and sexual aberrations, once unmentionable in decent circles, are now commonplace and excite no special protest. Yeah? So if you go from a spiritual part of this, so they've got the Western nations now to such a low moral platform that we're on par with these immigration people coming in. It's lowered itself down to that level. The doors are open. Okay. So then you enter the Beatles. Okay, so this is where your Beatles come in. MI5 controlled. Paul McCartney died in '66. They couldn't let it go. They had to keep it going because they had control of all the crazy, demented females who were on LSD. So he says, enter the Beatles, who would popularise social drug use, an exemplary mechanic and one well advanced on the methods used to hook the Chinese to opium through what would become the evangelical missions. So they used the evangelical missions to hook the Chinese people onto opium, and probably some of the Prussian Jesuit missions as well, I would suggest. So that's how they did it in China. Of course, here in the West, It was going to be, the same was going to be achieved through the 50s, 60s rock and roll and LSD. You know what I'm saying? And shag everybody, kill your babies, here have some contraception, and just have kids by everybody and wreck your families. That's exactly what came off the Aquarian conspiracy. And we're under occupation, remember, by NATO. Yeah? These immigrants are components of the occupation. Doesn't mean they know that themselves. Too stupid. They're indentured to it. Yeah? The late Aldo Moro, who's below, was Italian Prime Minister, was one leader who opposed zero growth and population reductions planned for his country, thereby incurring the wrath of the Club of Rome, commissioned by the Olympians, which is the Committee 300, to carry out its policies in all things environmental. So he refused. In a Roman courtroom on November the 10th, 1982, a close friend of Moro's testified that the former Prime Minister was threatened by an agent of the Royal Institute for International Affairs, who is also a member of the Committee 300, while he was still the US Secretary of State. So this threat came from a US Secretary of State, Committee 300 RIAA member, Henry Kissinger. Alright? So Henry Kissinger, as the Secretary of State, were issuing the orders to the President. Alright? And he threatened Aldo Moro for not wanting to play along. Now, it will be recalled that Prime Minister Moro was kidnapped by the Red Brigade. Yeah, we've just said, we mentioned the Red Brigades earlier, the terror squads of the Bolsheviks, in 1978, and subsequently was brutally shot to death. It was at the trial of members of the Red Brigades that several of them testified to the fact that they knew of high-level US involvement in the plot to kill Moro. But it's not US involvement, is it? It's Kissinger as Secretary of State. But of course, to the world, it's America. This is how they do it, you see. When I keep saying they front, they always they have to front it. Yeah. So like the fanatical Islam now is fronting this empire. And they haven't got a clue. They have no idea that that's what they are. Because they can't see that far and that deep into these things. Because they don't. They don't read anything. Where am I now? When threatening Moro, Kissinger was obviously not carrying out US foreign policy, but rather actually according to the instructions received from the Club of Rome, the foreign policy arm of the Committee of 300. The witness who delivered the bombshell in open court was a close associate of Moro's, Gerardo Gerzoni. His explosive testimony was broadcast over Italian television and radio on 10th November 1982 and printed in several Italian newspapers, yet this vital information was suppressed in the US. Aldo Moro was a loyal member of the Christian Democrat Party, was murdered by assassins controlled by P2 Masonry, with the objective of bringing Italy into line with Club of Rome's orders to deindustrialise the country and considerably reduce its population. So these programmes have been set off in all the Western nations here as well. Moro's plans to stabilise Italy through full employment and industrial and political peace would have strengthened Catholic opposition to communism. So the Catholic Church opposed on communism, yeah? It's Vatican II that changed that. This needs to be understood. And made the destabilisation of the Middle East a prime goal of that much order. So if the Catholics had managed to carry on opposing communism because of Vatican II hadn't been put in, the Middle East game, Israel idea, would never have been able to take off. It would not have been able to move. Yeah, I think Pope, one of the popes was asked if they'd back the Israel project. He said not a chance. He said no problem. I can't remember which pope it were. He was good, and any of you read him, he was a good guy. And he opposed it. Anyway, Vatican II made sure it happened, and it did happen, didn't it? He says Vatican II was the shift required in the Catholic Church to have it support communism, and was the child of the Prussian Jesuits, of course. And there's Aldo Moro. Avril Harriman, that's Avril Harriman above there, that's Moro above there, sorry. Avril Harriman above was the committee's director with the Kremlin and the White House, a position which Henry Kissinger inherited after the death of Harriman. So Avril Harriman held the position that Kissinger took over, yeah, as like an ambassador, as it were, for the committee. Kissinger's role in destabilising the United States was by means of war. The Middle East, so by sending the United States to war, that's how they've destabilised it, because it costs a fortune. The Middle East, Korea, Vietnam, First Gulf War, Yugoslavia, post 9/11 invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq. The next instalment under the cover of the Ukraine, and this is again my opinion, by Vladimir Putin, is to heat up the conflict between Iran and Israel without us seeing it, because that's heating up. The script of the priesthood is that Israel has to be attacked. Okay, it's a done deal. You know what I'm saying? A done deal. Hence why I think it's important that we recognise this idea of a heavenly Jerusalem that they're trying to create. Kissinger threatened the late Ali Bhutto, president of sovereign nation Pakistan, because he favoured nuclear weapons for his country. He did. Henry Kissinger below carried out the Andes Plan, which had a direct hand in creating the 25-year-old war in El Salvador. Again, I grew up with that, as an integral part of the wider plan drawn up by Elliot Abrams, the US statement of the US State Department. Kissinger was responsible for all that took place in Cambodia. The blame had to be shifted to a front. And this is Pol Pot. But now this is very interesting data on actually what was going on in Cambodia, because it was a beta test for what they're planning on doing everywhere. Right? So listen carefully to this. This took place from 1986 as the United States began the process of recognising the butchers of Cambodia. So Kissinger were responsible, but he ended up he made sure that America, through Reagan, recognised the butchers of Cambodia, which made it look like America then were backing it. Yeah? The butchers of Cambodia, which were the criminal Pol Pot regime. So if you ever heard punk stuff by dead Kennedys, it's exactly what it's all about. That's what they were about. I was big into them, actually. I learned a lot from dead Kennedys back in the 80s. This agenda was a pre-planned method of how to depopulate cities. Right? So the Cambodia experiment was about putting into practice a method of basically killing everybody in the cities. Right? So it were a test, an experiment that went live in a lot of other places, and it's going to be updated now. But I think all this 5G technology is that method that they're using to do it now. Okay. Again, that's my opinion. So the criminal Pol Pot regime self-confesses to the murder of 2 million Cambodian citizens. This agenda was a pre-planned method of how to depopulate cities. Thus, Pol Pot and his butchers were the experiment gone live. Keep this in mind, because the exercise was a success and is now a big part of the future plans for all cities of the world when the genocide kicks off in all cities. Made so much easier after the decades-long influx of multicultural components for NATO occupation. Consider that the UFO alien narrative to be the diversion of the alien invasion of foreign cultures into the cities, and today into the heartlands of nations ripe for internal genocide. And we are. I'm seeing the characters, the real characters of these downtrodden, imbecilic guests starting to come to the fore. They're struggling to hide it now. Exactly why they've been brought here, to massage that, so they don't have a leg to stand on when it turns around. And there's the toad himself, Heinz Kissinger. The polarising of South America and the US was a special assignment given to Kissinger by the Committee of 300. The Falklands War and the subsequent overthrow of the Argentine government, followed by economic chaos and political upheavals, were all planned by Kissinger associates, acting in concert with Lord Peter Carrington, a top-ranking member of the Committee of 300 and the handler of Margaret Thatcher. Now, Lord Peter Carrington was Thatcher's handler, but he was also a partnership with Kissinger in Kissinger Associates. Okay, he was a director, but he was higher than that. He was actually a partner. Okay, but you don't get that in data. I've tried to look for it. So much of the data that were available 10 years ago is gone, and it's been edited and rewritten. I've found in just looking into Kissinger Associates this week. So then there's a list of things Kissinger's. You can expand your awareness of just what he actually is. Prime Minister Disraeli, so this is our Prime Minister back in the day at the time of this American Civil War. Prime Minister Disraeli, member of the Committee of 300, ordered the death of Abraham Lincoln because he decided not to operate for the Prussian idea. Okay? He destroyed the South, he took the America's power into his own hands, and I think he were going to try and put it back in America's hands. Disraeli gave the order. Foreign aid gives right now. This is interesting. Let's get into this on foreign aid because it pisses everybody off. But I have wrote about this before that the foreign aid is actually funding the corporations in other countries to install the agenda they've already installed in these countries. So you're funding this shithead system in another country. They blag it to you by saying, "No, you're helping the people, you're helping the nation." You're not. You're helping this bunch of shit finance what they're doing in other countries to set this shit up. Yeah. Now, foreign aid gives control of a country's natural resources to the IMF. It was the idea of developing nations taking charge of their destiny that was an anathema to the Committee of 300. David Rockefeller knew what he was doing when his foreign aid bill became law in 1946. So the foreign aid law in America came in via David Rockefeller. Dependence on US foreign aid actually keeps foreign countries in servitude to the Council on Foreign Relations. This means the United States fronts a network to the IMF rather than being responsible to move its agenda in foreign countries with American dollars. So the taxpayers are paying for it because it's American aid, just like we're paying for it, it's our aid. And we're then used as a front because the world thinks we're doing it, but actually it's financing this committee's agenda. Zimbabwe and his president Mugabe received foreign aid from the US in the region of 300 million per annum to enable him to build 3 hotels in the French Côte d'Azur, Cape Ferrat and Monte Carlo. And Monte Carlo was the drug running centre for a very long time. It probably still is, but a lot of it did shift to Kosovo under NATO's auspices. But, you know, Princess Grace Kelly were murdered by this bunch when, I forgot his name, the guy who runs Monaco, we decided not to play along with this shit anymore. But he was funded originally by Onassis for this specific smuggling, because he was the shipping magnet, of course. And then pulled Jackie Kennedy over to some kind of trophy and symbolism, which he had to carry out in some of the Greek islands. You can see the images for that. So that's basically what that's all about, and there's a lot of institutions that are in it. So I've just basically put as a conclusion, the above presented web of deceit is the power that brought to life the reign of terror in Russia, the Bolshevik Revolution, World Wars I and II, Korea, Vietnam, the fall of Rhodesia, South Africa, Nicaragua, and the Philippines. It destroyed Yugoslavia, Iraq, Libya, created Israel, brought down the Twin Towers, and implemented the corporate script, which is the naval system, to govern the person. So it's the Prussian naval system parading as admiralty and maritime law in our systems today and dragging you in on person to this snow-hide slavery system. The Committee of 300 is the secret upper-level government that administers the dark will of the black mobility and its new Venetian party of the North. It is this network that brought into existence the controlled disintegration of the US economy and deindustrialize what was once the greatest industrial power for good that the world has ever known. Boris, Trump, Biden, Putin, Macron, Xi, and all the remaining so-called UN leaders have no will of their own. If it was so, they would be killed. See Africa lately. Yeah, a lot of African leaders have stepped up to the plate. They know more. They all play their part in securing the New World Order for the mindset your scripture screams at you, and I'll add it as evil. They are not the leaders of nations. They each take up the role of CEO in each respective bankrupt corporation. And they call it government. So that was that. Now I just want to look at some time here because I think I've rabbited on for quite some time. 1 hour 40. Good gracious. So sorry it took that long. I didn't expect it to take that long, to be quite honest. So where are you at? You're surrounded by dog. Well, there are a lot around, aren't they? Some of these drugs that they're on today, it's just ridiculous, you know. It's a sad state of affairs, really, to see these guys. What is going on? I've actually started just doing a bit of investigating into these drugs by people who are in the know. And basically, I forgot what it's called, actually. But there's one drug in particular that seems to be sweeping. It's tied to a medical drug, actually. They change its chemical structure and it becomes something else. So when asked why they take it, what does it do to them? What are you getting, basically? They say they can't remember. So obviously this thing knocks them out and they haven't got a clue what they're doing. So clearly this drug, now they're taking it, just escape. Just a bit of time. It's a proper escape because they haven't got to... It's not like they're getting high and having some fun with it. So yeah, you're looking at your zombie stuff. It's on its way. Good haircut. Cheers. Nice one. I do like it. It's actually, somebody's actually got it right. I used to have it back, way back in the time, and I loved it. But nobody seemed to be able to get it just right. Anyway, I found somebody that's got it just bang on. So thanks for that. It's an amazing time to be alive. The adventure beckoning is just amazing. I mean, obviously, if you're stuck to telly and you're retarded, you go into hell and you will go on that timeline. You are going to go down that timeline to its end. I'm on that timeline. I'm telling you about it. You know what I'm saying? Basically, pick your timeline, people. And when I say pick your timeline, I'm saying raise your frequency. Because it's the frequency that's going to determine your timeline. Do you know what I'm saying? If you're filled with hate and this invasive stuff, this war stuff, because you're evil, you think you're better than other people, you're gonna meet what you're looking to create. I'll tell you that now. In defensive, we're talking. When I mention this kind of stuff, I'm talking about it as we need to be aware of it because it's coming, and we need to be ready because it has to be thwarted. It has to be thwarted, as I will put down, by people seeing what they need to see, so they're not feeding that mindset. But also, if it does ground, which it will, because there's a lot of them kind of bad retard characters around, we also have to be ready for when it starts kicking off as well. Militia your mind, you know, this is what I'm saying. And as we started with the military, they love to get military out of here when they're doing stuff. They love it, you know. Come on, see it, guys. 60 slip disc. Well, I don't know whether the osteopath can fix your slip disc, but they usually can. Yeah, David, you've seen how he drinks. Yeah, he does an interview and eats it. He eats the plutonium. Plutonium isn't dangerous in and of itself. It has to be weaponized, and a certain. It has to be gone through a certain thing before it becomes what we class as weaponized. Then, giving off radiation, but it doesn't last that long. And not all nuclear weapons give off radiation either. Certainly not in the way that they push it out to the numpties in the 80s. No, it's not KET. It's actually a medical drug that they're using. I nearly said it begins with F, if I remember rightly, but I can't just offhand. So they're tweaking it, and it's more dangerous than methamphetamine, apparently. So yeah, but I'm starting to ask questions now. I just want to see what's happening with this. How rife is this this dodgy drug amongst people? Because you're taking it for a while, and all of a sudden they start to look like zombies. And when it gets to that, they're not aware. They're not compos mentis anymore, so they can't actually move it back. Once you get to that, you're pretty screwed, from what I can see. And I'm seeing it out there on the streets, you know. Yeah, hydrogen used in... Well, yeah, I mean, you just... What we believe and see in nuclear is a script. It's a scripted play to create fear, pretty much. Fentanyl, that's the one. So they're tweaking fentanyl in some way, and it's like 50 times more potent than the stuff that's wrecked America, and continues to do so. Okay, well, there were other things I was going to talk about, but... Well, actually, there is... let's have a look, because then somebody did say let's talk person, but there is a definition here that I forgot what it's in, so I meant to do it last week. I forgot, but there's an interesting bit in it that let me just pull this through into this Safari capture. Yeah, transition, and it doesn't transition. I wonder why it does that. How rubbish. Right, well, at least I know what to do now. Right, let's go back. There we go. So let's just have a little look at this. Because if I remember right, there were a very interesting bit in it that So it says different. This is Merriam-Webster's definition. It says noun, human individual, sometimes used in combination, especially by those who prefer to avoid man, in compounds applicable to both sexes. So can you see? It's showing you there what I've been papping on about all this time. There's a big difference between man, male, female, because man denotes both, and human and person. Yeah? So there you go. People who prefer to avoid man in compounds applicable to both sexes. So that's basically saying people who don't want to talk in biblical terms. Yeah? So there you go. I thought that was exceptionally interesting. And you might like to see that. So, right, with that, I think I can shut down Safari, and that might help my computer a little. And we've got Culpeppers. I mean, if you've got any questions at all of anything, illuminate creative person. Well, it goes way back. You're looking at Babylon. It's not a new thing. You know, but most people, when you look in history, you're coming from a religious perspective, point of reference. When I got stuck into this law, 13 years ago or whatever, it was probably longer than that. Because before I got into the person side of things, I'd started to look at the British law and the Constitution. But that aside, when you start looking at scripture from a law book, as a law book, so like Jesus, you can see a lot of his stuff, it's basically you're walking on water. It's symbolic. How do you want to walk on the sea of commerce without falling the fuck in? You know what I'm saying? There's all these little... So there's many ways to interpret biblical text, and the law is one of them. Yeah? Because there were some times back in the day, I used to think, why the hell do I keep obsessing with this law when all it does is wreck my life? Do you know what I'm saying? But now I understand why. So yeah, that definition of person just again shows you that man does determine and define as male, female. It's all of us. Yeah? Anyway. Culpeppers. Something good. Let's have a look. It says, Archangel. To put a gloss upon their practice, the physicians call an herb, which country people vulgarly know by the name of dead nettles, Archangel wherein whether they favour more of a superstition or a folly, I leave to the judicious reader. There is more curiosity than courtesy to my countrymen, used by others in the explanation, as well as the names and descriptions of this well-known herb, which that I may not also be guilty of. Take this short description first of the red archangel. Didn't they write beautifully? I mean, I look like a thick ass when you look at my writing compared to this, like poetry. Description. This has diverse square stalks, somewhat hairy at the joints, whereof grow 2 fat green leaves, dented about the edges, opposite each other, the lowermost upon long footstalks, but without any towards the tops, which are somewhat round, yet pointed and a little crumpled, and hairy round about the upper joints. Where the leaves grow thick are sundry gaping flowers of pale reddish colour, after which come the seeds. Again. 3 or 4 in a husk. The root is small and thready, perishing every year. The whole plant hath a strong scent, but not stinking. Not stinking. White archangel has diverse square stalks, none flanding upright, but bending downward, whereon 2 leaves at a joint, larger and more pointed than the other, dented about the edges, and greener also, more like unto nettle leaves, but not stinging. God, I must have rushed this. Not stinging, yet hairy at the joints. With the leaves stand larger and more open, gaping white flowers, in husks round about the stalks, but not with such a bustle of leaves and flowers set on the top as the other, wherein stand small roundish black seeds. The root is white with many strings at it, not growing downward, but lying under the upper crust of the earth, and abideth many years increasing. This has not so strong a scent as the former. Yellow archangel is like the white in the stalks and leaves, but the stalks are more straight and upright. Sorry, where am And the joints with leaves are farther asunder, having longer leaves than the former, and the flowers a little larger and more gaping, of the fur yellow, moist, same, and some paler. The roots are like the white, only the creepeth not so much on the ground. Just let me bash this here on. I didn't realise I was still showing that person. Place. They grow almost everywhere, unless it be in the middle of the street. The yellow most usually in the wet grounds of woods, and sometimes in the drier and diverse counties of this nation. Time. They flower from the beginning of spring till the summer long. Virtues and use. The archangels are somewhat hot and drier than the stinging nettles, and used with better success for the stopping and hardness of the spleen, than they by using the decoction of the herb in wine, and afterwards applying the herb hot unto the region of the spleen as a plaster, so hot, or the decoction with sponges. The flowers of the white archangel are preserved and conserved to be used to flay the whites, and the flowers of the red to flay the reds in woman. So I'm not sure I understood all that. I might have to rejig that a bit. But it's good for the spleen, is that? And that's archangel. Smart. The hot Smart is called also water pepper and Coleridge. The mild Smart is called dead Smart, porcicaria, or peachwort, because the leaves are so like the leaves of a peach tree. It is also called plumbago, description of the mild. This hath broad leaves set at the great red joints of the stalks, with semicircular blackish marks on them usually, yet sometimes without the flowers, growing long spikes, usually either bluish or whitish, with such like seed flowing. The root is long, with many somewhat thereat, perishingly yearly. This has no sharp taste as another sort has, which is quick and biting, but rather sour like sorrel, or else a little drying, or without taste. Place. It grows in watery places, ditches, and the like, which for the most part are dry in summer. Place. It grows in watery places, ditches, and the like, which for the most part are dry in summer. It flowereth in June, and the seed is ripe in August. Government and virtues. As the virtues of both these is various, so are also their government. For that which is hot and biting is under the dominion of Mars, but Saturn challengeth. The other is appears by lead-coloured spot he hath placed upon the leaf. The water Smart is of great use in the, I don't know what that is, of the kidneys or bladder. A draught of it being taken every morning for 2 or 3 months together. A country gentleman used a load of this herb in a year to make the water, wherewith he cured many of the stone. So again, getting rid of stones. The root or seed put into an aching hollow tooth takes off the pain. There is scarce anything more effectual to drive away flies, for whatever wounds or ulcers cattle have, if they are anointed with the juice of Smart, the flies will not come near. Though it is the heat of the summer, even though it's the heat of the summer. It is of a cooling and dyeing quality, and so that if you've got horses and cattle, the Smart is what you want. It's very effectual for petrified ulcers in man or beast, to kill worms and cleanse the petrified places, or putrefied places. The juice thereof, dropped in or otherwise applied, consumeth all cold swellings, and dissolveth the congealed blood of bruises by strokes, falls, and sea. The leaves brewed and laid to the joint have a selim thereon. Take it away, the juice destroyeth worms in the ears. Worms in your ears? I never knew that. Being dropped into them. If hot, Smart be stewed in a chamber, it will soon kill all the fleas and drive away all the flies in the hottest time of summer. A good handful of the hot biting Smart put under the horse's saddle will make him travel the better, although he were half tired before. Now then, the mild Smart is good against the imposthumes and inflammations at the beginning, and to heal green wounds. All authors chop the virtues of both sorts of assortment of Arsysmart together as men chop herbs for the pot, when both of them are quite contrary qualities. The hot Arsysmart groweth not so high or tall as the mild doth, but hath many leaves of the colour of peach leaves, very seldom or never spotted in other particulars. It is like the former, but may be easily known from it. If you will be like but pleased to break a leaf of it across your tongue, for the hot will make your tongue so smart, but the cold will not. If you see them both together, you may easily distinguish them, because the mild hath far broader leaves, and our College of Physicians, out of their learned care for the public good, and glass their own gain, wrong word, mistake the one for the other in their new masterpiece, whereby they discover their ignorance to their carelessness. And he hath but half an eye may see their pride without a pair of spectacles. So he's giving all pharmaceutical guys a good spanking. I have done what I could to distinguish them in their virtues, and when you find not the contrary named, use the cold. So he's giving you a bit of a warning there that there's two parts, and they're definitely different in what they actually do for you. So there we go. I can't believe just how much knowledge we've lost, and we have lost this stuff because people just don't know it anymore, do they? Right, so excellent tune tonight. Thank you very much. I hope you got something from this. Do you believe it will get to a point that we will all need to defend ourselves, or is preparing for that going to cause us? Well, no, it doesn't lower your vibrations to defend yourself. That's natural law. You know, they've persuaded everybody that violence is not something you should ever do, no matter what. And they've took the piss with Jesus. You turn the other cheek. What bollocks is that? You know what I'm saying? You can't stand there and say, fuck off, and you can fuck off alone to everybody he meets, when he's basically telling them they're full of shit. And then what he's trying to say is, don't think you've to get involved in the judgment of them. Do you know what I'm saying? Don't be thinking that it's your job, because you're into this thing, that you have to become judgment. Yeah? On what you're exposing. You don't. Expose it. Speak it. Say it, because you know it's fact. So others can hear it and move away from it. But you don't have to consider yourself fixed to the point that you have to become their judgment. It's a waste of your time and energy. They'll come to their end when it's time for them to come to their end, because it's the best for them to learn. It's not our job to be getting excited about judgment. However, self-defense is a completely different animal. If you are being attacked, you do whatever is necessary to stop you being harmed, and your family and your property, if need be. You know? Because that's where we're at. So that's how I would say, understand that. Be ready for anything. Yeah? Utrinque apparatus. Be ready for anything. And with that, my fine friends, I will say, thank you very much for joining in. Stuart, Ray, if you've been out there doing your thing, thanks very much. And I will say, hope you have a good week. Till the next time.